I still remember the smell of old cedar and dust that drifted through that house. It clung to every surface, weaving itself into my lungs, so distinct that even now, when I catch that particular scent blending into the air, my heart clenches. Sometimes I can almost feel the walls come pressing in. There was something about my grandmother's house that never felt right. It was an old farmhouse, 2 stories, with faded green shutters and a wraparound porch. My grandmother passed away when I was still a teenager, and my parents had me help organize her estate. Among my cousins, I was the most reluctant to enter the house. Yet, I was the one who inherited it. Even then, I felt a chill whenever I touched the doorknobs, like a current of electricity that never belonged in an ordinary home. No one else ever mentioned those cold sparks. Maybe they felt them, maybe they didn't. But the house and I had our own private conversation. When my grandmother died, my parents moved across the country, but I stayed nearby for college, drifting away from them with every year. The house sat empty for a while, silent in its own unspoken gloom. I found reasons not to visit. Work, studies, relationships I swore were serious, but never lasted. Deep down, I just didn't want to face that place again. But about a year ago, I received a call from an old family friend living next to the property, complaining about raccoons getting into the crawl space, worrying about potential damage. She asked if I could come out and check, maybe hire an exterminator. Part of me dreaded it, but another part was morbidly curious. Perhaps I thought facing it might give me some closure, some final answer I'd been seeking since childhood. I arrived on a late afternoon in November. The skies were gray, almost colorless, and the bare trees reached their branches like skeletal arms. The house looked the same as it had a decade ago, just more worn, paint peeling, shutters barely hanging on. I remember standing at the edge of the driveway, the gravel crunching beneath my feet. I couldn't move. Minutes passed, and I let the cold breeze wrap around me. Finally, I found the courage to step onto the porch, the wood groaning under my weight just as I remembered. Right away, that smell, cedar and dust, embraced me. My shoulders tightened. I used the old brass key my family had passed down for generations. It turned with a soft click, and the door opened as though it had been waiting for me. The interior was dark, musty, but not entirely unpleasant. I hesitated, reaching for the light switch on the wall, remembering how it used to be in a slightly different spot than in most homes. My hand found it, flicked it, but the bulb was dead, or maybe the electricity was out. I wasn't sure. So I stood in the darkness, letting my eyes adjust. I heard something, or maybe I sensed it, a gentle creaking above me, as though footsteps were moving across the upstairs floor. My heart quickened. I told myself it must be old wood settling, or maybe something rummaging in the attic. Still, I felt that old unease gnawing at the back of my mind, an unshakable sense of being watched. Before I could second-guess myself, I noticed the sunlight slipping through the living room windows, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air like tiny ghosts. It gave me just enough light to see the furniture. All of it was still there, draped in white sheets, reminding me of silent, shrouded figures. The sight made me shiver. I walked deeper into the living room, passing the old grandfather clock that stood in the corner. I had always hated that clock, with its hollow chimes that echoed through the house every hour. It was silent now, covered in a sheet, its face hidden from the world. I tugged one of the sheets, letting it slide off the couch, sending up a small cloud of dust. My nose tickled, and I sneezed, my voice echoing in the silence. The place was so eerily still that every sound I made reverberated in my skull. I sat down, feeling the old cushions sink beneath me, and I remembered so many afternoons spent here while my grandmother baked pies or knitted in her rocking chair. But now, the house felt bereft of warmth. It felt like an abandoned stage set, waiting for an actor's reunion that would never come. As night approached, I realized I would have to risk staying over. The nearest motel was miles away, and I figured I could handle one night. I found a dusty flashlight in a kitchen drawer, checked that it still worked, and then I made my way through the hallway. The floors seemed to groan with each step, and every so often, I'd pause, holding my breath, listening. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was there, just out of sight. I whispered to myself, a nervous habit, "It's just the house settling. It's just the wind." But the words sounded hollow. I opened the door to the study. My grandmother used to keep all sorts of antiques in there. Old letters, family heirlooms, strange trinkets she'd pick up at yard sales. The flashlight's beams swept over dusty shelves and closed cabinets. My reflection flickered in a large oval mirror leaning against the wall. My heart jolted. I thought I saw movement behind me. Spinning around, I only caught my shadow rippling in the light, still alone. I couldn't help but feel embarrassed at my own jumpiness. But that nervousness never left. Even in the calmer moments, it lurked just beneath the surface. Eventually, I found old candles in a drawer and a box of matches. I lit a few to provide some soft light, though their flickering shadows made the rooms look even more unsettling. I set the candles around the living room, noting how the shapes on the walls seemed to stretch and sway, almost as if something alive pulsed in the corner of my vision. The entire house seemed to exhale, letting out small groans with every stray breeze outside. I tried not to let the darkness get to me, but it did. Around dinner time, stomach rumbling, I remembered there was a local diner about a 15-minute drive from the house. Part of me wanted to flee, but I felt an odd sense of responsibility, like if I left, the house would do something behind my back. Silly, childish thoughts, but they rooted me to the spot. I rummaged through the old pantry, found some stale crackers and a tin of fruit that somehow wasn't expired. I ate it slowly, glancing at the windows every few moments. The outside was pitch black, the final traces of twilight completely gone. I decided to turn in early. The old bedroom I used to sleep in when visiting my grandmother was upstairs at the end of the hallway. Climbing the staircase brought a wave of apprehension, the steps creaking so loudly that each one felt like a shriek in the silent house. My flashlight revealed the slightly warped walls and the peeling wallpaper. I paused, facing a long family portrait hung on the wall, half covered in shadow. My grandmother stood in the center, her stern expression a stark contrast to the younger family members smiling around her. I thought I saw something odd in that picture, a shape in the corner that I hadn't noticed before. But it was probably just a stain or a smudge from years of neglect. At the end of the hallway, the door to my old bedroom stood ajar. Another faint creak made me whip around, scanning the darkness behind me. My throat felt tight. I couldn't see anything unusual, just the swirling shadows. I hurried inside, and shut the door behind me, leaning my forehead against the old wood. My heart was pounding, and I didn't even know why. I lit another candle, setting it on the nightstand. The small bed looked just as I remembered, though the sheets were a bit yellowed from time. I peeled them back, shaking off layers of dust. The mattress smelled of must, the faint cedar undertone still lingering in the fibers. I sat there for a moment, gazing around. The window overlooked the backyard. Down below, I could make out gnarled tree branches that once supported a swing I used in my childhood. Threadbare curtains dangled, and the whole room felt like a snapshot from 2 decades ago. I tried to sleep, but my mind refused to settle. My eyes kept drifting to the corners of the room, expecting them to move or show me something unnatural. The house was so quiet that my own breathing seemed deafening. I might have dozed off a bit, but then I heard a distinct sound, something like a soft knock against the wall outside the bedroom. My eyes flew open, and I sat up in bed, listening. Combined with the flicker of candlelight from behind me. Still, I couldn't rid myself of the prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I spent the rest of that night fully dressed, the covers pulled to my chin. Whenever I drifted into a light sleep, faint tapping would stir me. It almost felt like it moved around the walls, as though it was circling the room. A slow, patient presence. By morning, I was groggy and anxious. I wanted to run, but I'd promised to deal with the critter problem in the crawl space, and the job would be awkward or costly to dump on a neighbor. So I forced myself downstairs. The morning light seeped through the curtains, revealing the living room and kitchen in a less eerie hue. Dusty, yes, but not overtly sinister. That said, an undercurrent of tension thrummed in my chest, never letting me forget the sense of being unwelcome. I opened the back door and made my way around the side of the house to the low opening that led to the crawl space. The foundation crumbled in a few spots, giving raccoons or other animals easy entry. I crouched down, peering inside. The rank smell of damp earth enveloped me. I switched on the flashlight and crawled in, the beams slicing through the darkness. Cobwebs brushed against my forehead, making me shudder. Inside, old pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping occasionally. I shuffled forward, trying not to inhale too deeply. My flashlight revealed nests made of leaves and shredded paper. I could hear faint skittering in the far corner, probably rodents or raccoons scurrying away from my intrusion. I tried to shine the light to discern how bad the infestation was. Then, in the beam's periphery, a shape fluttered. My heart lurched. I panned the light back. Nothing, but something about the air changed, and I very nearly smacked my head on the overhead beam. My skin crawled. For a moment, I could almost feel someone breathing behind me. But when I turned again, only wet earth and darkness met my gaze. I scrambled backward, bumping into something metal. It was a small metal hatch set into the foundation wall, something I'd never noticed before. It seemed locked from the outside, but the lock was old and rusty. Instinct told me to ignore it and get out. Despite that, I reached out, the dampness coating my fingers, and I tugged at the latch. It snapped off in my hand. The hatch swung open a few inches, squealing. With shaky curiosity, I pushed it further. My flashlight revealed a small recess, like a hidden compartment, though it wasn't high enough to be a cellar. More a strange storage nook. Inside lay a rotting wooden crate, half disintegrated by moisture. I edged closer, my breath hitching in my throat. Inside the crate, I saw something wrapped in old burlap. Slowly, I lifted the flashlight to get a better view. The burlap was tied with twine, and after a moment's hesitation, I slid my pocket knife through the knot. The fabric fell away, revealing several folded letters, a cracked photograph, and a small burlap pouch. My grandmother's name was written on the letters in a shaky hand I didn't recognize. The photograph was water damaged, showing a small child standing in front of the farmhouse. But their face wasn't visible, blurred by the photo's age or something else. My stomach twisted. Why had this been hidden away? I gently picked up the burlap pouch. A faint jingling came from within. Pulling it open, I found a handful of what looked like old coins or medals. They bore strange symbols, nothing I recognized. My fingertips tingled, almost numb, like when your hand falls asleep. A sudden wave of nausea hit me, and I dropped the pouch, the coins clattering on the crate. My mind raced with questions, but the only thing I felt certain about was that I needed to leave this place, at least for now. I wrapped everything back up, replaced it in the crate, and shoved the hatch shut. I practically crawled out of there, mud caking my clothes, heart pounding so hard I could barely think. Back in the daylight, I tried to gather my bearings, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The wind felt cold against my sweat-soaked skin. I heard a rustle of leaves behind me and turned to see Mrs. Larson, the neighbor who'd originally called me. Her voice broke the tense silence. "I saw your car. Thought I'd check on you." I forced a smile, probably unconvincing. "Just dealing with some critters," I managed to say, my voice tight. She peered at me strangely. "You don't look so good. Everything all right?" I wiped my mouth, swallowing. "I just found something odd. Some old letters under the house." Her expression shifted, a flicker of unease. "That house has secrets, you know. Your grandmother was a kind woman, but she had her reasons to lock certain things away." I hesitated. "Did you ever hear anything about that side of her?" Mrs. Larson shook her head, lips pressed thin. "Not directly, but every town has rumors. They say your grandmother had a brother who disappeared as a child. No one ever knew the details. Some say he ran away. Others say he died in an accident. But the older folks used to whisper about unnatural things. Of course, that's just talk." She gave a forced smile. "If there's nothing else, I'll leave you to it." I watched her go, my mind reeling. I'd never heard about a brother. My grandmother never spoke of siblings, never hung pictures of anyone other than direct family. The revelation left me shaken. Trying to keep myself busy, I patched up the crawlspace opening best I could, blocking any obvious entry points for animals. Then, drained, I stepped inside the house. I wanted so badly to pack up and go, but an odd pull within me insisted I stay. Maybe I wanted answers. Maybe the house wouldn't let me go yet. That evening, darkness fell early. The November chill seeped through the walls, and I lit more candles, wishing the electricity worked. I tried flipping the breaker box in the basement, but no luck. I set up the small battery-powered lantern I found in the closet. The house felt even more oppressive now, as if each hallway contained eyes. My nerves were frayed, yet I was determined to read the letters I'd found. Despite my panic earlier, I'd grabbed them before leaving the crawlspace without reading them. Something in me needed to know. I sat at the kitchen table, the candlelight dancing across the faded letters. The handwriting was spidery, and time had turned the ink a brownish shade. The first few letters were short, addressed to my grandmother. They were dated decades ago, each referencing something about a ritual or a promise. Words like repent and atonement jumped out at me. The tone felt unhinged, desperate. The final letter was longer, detailing how his presence grows stronger at night. And she can hear the tapping in the walls, or is it inside her own mind? My stomach twisted into knots, my hands trembling. It sounded so similar to my experiences in the night, tapping in the walls. Fear lanced up my spine, and my eyes flickered to the hallway. I forced my focus back to the letter. Toward the end, it mentioned something about the crate hidden beneath the foundation, how it must remain sealed so that the memory of him does not spread. Who was him? My grandmother's brother, presumably. But what had happened to him? I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I thought about the photograph of that blurred child. Could that have been him? Or was it something else entirely? Suddenly, I felt the house shift again, a subtle pressure in the air, a sensation of being observed. The candle flame quivered, and I stared at it, almost expecting it to go out. It did not, but I swear I felt a presence linger by the doorway, just outside my line of sight. I spoke softly to the empty room. "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice carried strangely, as if the walls swallowed it. At the edge of my hearing, I caught a faint knock, knock, knock. This time it came from the kitchen wall itself, inches from where I sat. My body tensed and I dropped the letter, my pulse racing. Steeling myself, I rose from the chair. I pressed my ear to the wall, heart hammering in my chest. I heard nothing for a moment, only my shaky breathing. Then, a soft scratching, as if nails scraping against wood. I stumbled back, knocking over the candle. Hot wax splattered my hand. Cursing under my breath, I scrambled to avoid a fire, grabbing the candle and placing it upright. The flame was snuffed out, leaving me in darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight, switching it on, the beam sweeping across the walls. Nothing. But the memory of those nails scraping lingered in my ears. In that moment, exhausted and half mad with fear, I rushed out of the kitchen and headed for the front door. I needed air. Outside, the moon was nearly full, casting a faint silver glow. I paced along the porch, trying to calm down. The wind had picked up, rustling the trees so they groaned and bent. The shadows outside seemed to shift in tandem with my rising dread. I forced a deep breath, letting the cold air stab my lungs, reminding me I was still alive, still human. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure at the edge of the property, near the tree line. I froze, flashlight trembling in my grip. The figure stood so still it could have been a statue. I called out, voice trembling, "Who's there?" My words fell flat against the wind. Squinting, I realized the shape blended into the darkness, almost translucent, or perhaps just hidden by the gloom. A knot of panic coiled in my gut. I forced my feet forward, 2 steps, shining the light. Before I could move closer, the figure disappeared, dissolving into the night. I ran to the spot. Shining the flashlight wildly among the bronzed leaves and twisted branches. No one was there. My head spun. I wasn't sure if my tired mind had played tricks on me, or if something truly stood there, watching. Adrenaline still coursed through my body, but I felt drained. My logical brain screamed at me to leave, but a heavier weight inside me insisted there was more to uncover. I looked back at the house. Even from here, I could sense its silent pull. A gravity that had been woven into my family's history. With shaky resolve, I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. Determined to end this nightmare, I carried the letters and candle upstairs to my grandmother's old bedroom. Maybe there I could piece more together. The bedroom door was already open, which unsettled me because I remembered shutting it earlier. Inside, it smelled stale, like the room had trapped decades of secrets in its corners. I lit the candle on the small vanity table. The mirror above it reflected my own haggard face. Dark circles formed under my eyes, and my hair was tousled, soaked in sweat. I felt I barely recognized myself. With a nervous swallow, I looked around. The furniture remained as it was: a four-poster bed with heavy quilts, a wardrobe, a floral-patterned chair by the window. Everything was just as I remembered from childhood visits, but now it felt different. Each shape infused with an unspoken tension. I set the letters down, took a deep breath, and tried to read more thoroughly. One letter, dated sometime in the 1950s, mentioned, "Mother keeps hearing him cry at night, and I'm scared of what he might become." There was talk of the caretaker, someone who tried to quell the child's growing anger but failed. A sense of guilt bled through every line. My eyes flickered across words like "darkness clings to him." Nightly shadows and the watchers. Then the final line chilled me. "We must not let him take another soul." I nearly dropped the paper, my breathing labored. Another child, my great-uncle, had apparently experienced something beyond a typical ailment or tragedy, something that made him different. My grandmother's silence about him suddenly felt ominous. I stared at the bedroom walls. Faint scratches marred the wallpaper, almost hidden by the floral pattern. Had they always been there? Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the window. I jumped at the sudden sound, a combination of fear and exhaustion gnawing at my sanity. I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly, counting to 10. But the hush that followed felt unnatural, as if the house itself held its breath. Then, near my feet, I heard it, a faint scraping from beneath the floorboards. My eyes snapped open. I stared at the wooden floor. The scraping came again, pausing, then continuing. Dragging, halting, like someone crawling just below. "Stop," I whispered, tears burning my eyes. "Please, stop." It did not stop. The scraping grew louder, heading toward the corner near the closet. I felt a wave of nausea. Something was underneath the floor, moving with dreadful deliberation. Candlelight flickered, and I took an involuntary step back. For a moment, I considered running. But I grabbed the old iron fireplace poker that leaned against the wall. Why was it even in this room? And I moved toward the closet. My hand shook as I gripped the handle, swinging the door open. Darkness greeted me. At first, I saw only dusty clothes and old cardboard boxes. Then, behind those boxes, I spotted a small door that I'd never noticed before, low to the ground, set into the wall. It was about 2 feet high, painted the same color as the wall. nearly invisible. I heard faint scratching from behind it, and my heartbeat thundered in my ears. With trembling hands, I set the candle on the floor, gently moving the boxes aside. The door had no handle, just a small latch at the top. My instincts screamed not to open it, but the relentless tapping, the knowledge of the letters, the hush in the air, it all pushed me forward. I lifted the latch. The door creaked open, revealing a crawl space that extended beneath the room, maybe linking to the hidden nook I'd seen outside. An icy draft prickled my skin. My flashlight's beam trembled as I pointed it inside. The narrow space stretched into darkness. The floor was covered in old blankets and battered dolls, their glass eyes reflecting the light with a hollow stare. My stomach lurched. Why would there be dolls down here? Then I saw fresh scratches along the boards, some carved so deep they splintered. My flashlight landed on what looked like a small handprint burned into the wood. My vision swam. Something shifted in the darkness. Fear exploded in my chest. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the candle. Then I heard a whisper, or something that approximated a whisper, like wind through a crack. It was faint, but it seemed to form a single word that I could almost, but not quite, understand. My mouth went dry as I realized I was crouched mere inches from that hidden space. Slowly, I forced myself to lean closer, the flashlight beam shaking violently in my grip. I wanted to see, needed to confirm whether my eyes were inventing horrors. A pale shape, crouched near the back wall, moved. I could see a patch of what might have been hair or a rag, and a single, glistening eye reflecting the beam. My mind screamed that this was impossible, that no one could survive in such a cramped, hidden space. Yet there it was, or I believed it to be, shifting in the darkness. The floor beneath me groaned as I inched backward. Hardly breathing, I reached out to pull the small door shut, but the shape lurched forward with startling speed. The door slammed in my face, knocking me from my crouch, sending me sprawling onto the bedroom floor. I inhaled sharply. All my muscles seized. The door was closed now, but the scraping resumed, frenzied, as if something inside was clawing at the wood. I fumbled to my feet, heart pounding so hard I thought my ribcage would crack. Candle wax dripped onto the floor, forming weird patterns. The fireplace poker, stepping back from the closet. The frantic scratching finally ceased, replaced by absolute silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. I don't know how long I stood there, staring, my vision blurred with tears, and my mind fought to rationalize what was happening. Part of me thought maybe I was hallucinating from exhaustion, from old trauma I never confronted. But deep down, I knew the house had always been waiting, feeding on secrets. Retrieved the candle, blew it out, and picked up my flashlight. I forced myself to leave the room, shutting the bedroom door behind me. Then I went to my own old room, locked the door, and sank to the floor. My head was spinning with exhaustion. I don't even remember collapsing onto the bed. I just remember darkness. When I opened my eyes, morning light bled through the window. I felt a stiffness in my limbs and a stale taste in my mouth. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then it all crashed back, the memory of the night's terror. My first impulse was to run, to flee the house and never return. But one look around told me that might not be so easy. I cleaned up as best I could, grabbed the letters, my phone, and my flashlight, and headed downstairs. I tried the front door, half expecting it to be stuck, but it opened easily. Outside, the day was cold, but bright. I walked to my car, intending to drive away forever. But as I reached the driver's side, I paused. Something inside me balked at the idea of leaving whatever was hidden in this house behind. My grandmother's memory, the hush of the walls, the knowledge that this presence might linger here forever. Gritting my teeth, I decided to search the attic. I knew that was where my grandmother kept a trunk of family records. If I found proof of her brother, maybe I could put this puzzle together and finally end it. It was an insane compulsion, but I couldn't walk away yet. So I steeled myself once more. The attic door was in the upstairs hallway ceiling, accessed by a pull-down ladder. The old rope felt brittle in my hand. I tugged, and it resisted, as though something latched onto it from above. Finally, it gave with a crack, and the ladder creaked down. Dust and debris rained on me. I coughed, shining my flashlight up into the darkness. The air smelled stale, with an undercurrent of cedar and something fouler. Climbing those rickety steps felt like ascending into a tomb. The attic was cramped and stuffed with boxes and furniture covered in sheets. I had to stoop to avoid the low beams. My flashlight flicked over old bookcases, a few trunks, a rocking horse missing an eye, and random junk. Eventually, I spotted the old trunk my grandmother used to keep locked. I carefully made my way over, pushing aside cobwebs. The trunk was made of dark wood, bound with metal. The lock was already undone. Lifting the lid, I found stacks of letters, photo albums, and diaries. My eyes darted across them, noticing familiar handwriting. I leafed through a diary from the 1940s. My grandmother's name was written inside. Entries about her daily life, chores, a few lines about her mother's decline in health. Then, abruptly, an entry about my brother's nighttime wandering. She wrote of how he spoke in tongues, or perhaps just delirious nightmares, how the voices told him to hide in walls. My blood ran cold. Another entry described a deal their father tried to make, how the house's foundation was laid upon cursed ground, or so the rumor went. My grandmother wrote that they tried to keep her brother safe, but he changed. His eyes were not his own. I couldn't read further. Nausea twisted my stomach. I heard a faint creak at the far side of the attic. My flashlight swung in that direction, illuminating a tall mirror leaning against a wooden beam. Something or someone passed across its reflection for a split second. My heart thundered. I slowly approached the mirror, the trunk forgotten. My face looked back at me, ashen and terrified. But behind me, in the reflection, a dark shape seemed to hover near the ladder. I spun around, eyes wild. Nothing. I turned back to the mirror, and the shape was gone. That was the final push. I slammed the trunk shut, nearly pinching my fingers, and fled down the ladder, not bothering to close the attic hatch. Racing down the hall, I saw that the door to my grandmother's bedroom was ajar again, as if beckoning me. I refused to go near. Instead, I threw my things into my car, speed dialing the closest motel I could find on my phone. Within an hour, I was checked into a dingy room off the highway, my mind swirling. I felt a crushing guilt, like I'd let some malevolent force loose by poking around. The rational part of me contested that the house was simply old. My imagination was in overdrive. But the sensible part of me was overshadowed by an unshakable dread. I spent 2 sleepless nights at that motel, hearing phantom scratches whenever the air conditioner kicked on or the water pipes rattled. I jumped at shadows in the corners, kept the lights on constantly. On the 3rd day, I mustered the courage to call a distant uncle who was older and might know family history. He was evasive, but when I mentioned the possibility of a missing great uncle, he fell silent. Then, finally, "Don't go digging up old ghosts," he warned. Reading between the lines, I realized he knew far more than he wanted to share. I felt trapped. The house was mine. The burden was mine. I feared that if I left it to rot, something dark would continue to fester there, taking its toll on anyone who wandered too close. In my desperation, I even thought about burning it down. But something about that notion filled me with unease, as if the house wouldn't let such a fate befall it easily. In the end, I called a contractor and arranged for an inspection, hoping to find a more logical explanation: structural damage, rodents, anything that might explain the phenomena. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. The day of the inspection, I arrived early with the inspector. He was a jovial man, probably in his 40s, with a firm handshake. "Pretty old place you got here," he said, looking up at the sagging roof. I merely nodded. Inside, the house was quiet. I led him through the rooms, trying to stay close, my nerves taut. He asked about the attic, the basement, the crawl spaces. He wanted to see everything. Part of me hoped the presence might show itself, so I wouldn't feel like a madman alone, but everything stayed disturbingly calm. In the basement, he studied the pipes, tapping them with a wrench, shining a flashlight in dark corners. He noticed the hidden hatch in the foundation, the one I'd forced open, and gave me a puzzled look. "Odd construction," he muttered. "Probably an old storage space. Might need sealing." He poked around a bit, then shrugged. "No serious damage, structurally speaking. The floors and walls upstairs do have some questionable angles," he admitted, "but nothing too severe. I see no sign of the big problems you mentioned." He gave me a slightly concerned look. "If you're hearing noises, it's likely raccoons or mice in the walls. Nothing that can't be fixed." We moved upstairs. As soon as we reached the top landing, a chill spread through the air. The inspector frowned. "Feels colder up here. Might be a draft." He walked to my grandmother's old room. The door resisted when he tried to open it, as if stuck. But after a push, it swung open. That stale smell hit us, and I saw his nose wrinkle. "Something died in here?" he asked, stepping in with his flashlight. My heart pounded, dread surging. He moved the flashlight methodically across the floor, and we both noticed dark stains by the closet. Closer inspection revealed they were old water stains, or mold. The inspector huffed. "Needs some bleaching, but it's not too serious." I stood there, fighting the memory of the frantic scratching. Had I dreamt all of that? He wrapped up his inspection after checking the attic, noting potential roof leaks, but nothing outrageous. On our way out, he shook his head. "From a structural standpoint, there's nothing here that screams haunted house or anything. I suggest you fix the leaks, reseal the foundation, maybe redo wiring. Could be a nice property if you invest in it." He offered a small smile, then departed, leaving me standing in the silent living room, feeling both relieved and unnerved. The house had concealed itself well. In the days that followed, I tried to push the events out of my mind. I tried to plan for renovations, to pretend everything could be ordinary. But at night, I couldn't sleep. I'd hear those taps in my dreams, that rhythmic knock, 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 accompanied by a pale figure lurking at the foot of my bed. In a haze of anxiety, I decided I would seal the crawl space hatch myself, board up that hidden door in the closet, and lock away the letters. Perhaps that would close the chapter. Perhaps the house would fall silent. When I arrived to do the work, the sky was overcast, a familiar November gloom. I stepped inside, noticing an immediate difference, an oppressive heaviness in the air, as if the house was angry. I wasted no time. I crawled beneath the foundation to that small hatch and hammered in boards until I was confident nothing could get in or out. My hands shook the whole time. Then, inside, I went upstairs, ignoring the bedroom where the secret door lay. I meant to seal it completely, nails and boards, so no one would ever open it again. But within seconds of stepping into that room, I froze. The door in the closet stood open, though I had left it latched. My flashlight revealed the cramped space beyond. Something had violently torn the blankets and dolls apart, scattering stuffing and cloth. Deep scratches gouged the beams, and the smell of damp rot assaulted me. Swallowing hard, I stepped back, refusing to venture inside. I moved quickly, setting a board across the opening, driving nails in with trembling hands. With every strike of the hammer, I felt as if I was waking something deeper, heavier. At last, the door was sealed. Exhausted, I slumped against the wall, exhaling. I allowed myself a single moment of relief until I heard the faintest sound muffled behind the boards I'd just nailed. Knock, knock. A chill shot down my spine. I scrambled out of the closet, out of the room, and down the stairs. My heart thundered in my chest, my mind screaming at me to leave. The front door banged shut behind me as I fled to my car. I drove away without looking back, tears burning in my eyes. I've been staying with friends ever since, ignoring phone calls from realtors, from neighbors. The house stands empty. Twice, I've tried to list it for sale, but each time I recall that frantic scratching, the intangible presence waiting behind the boards. My grandmother's brother, or whatever remains of him, still lingers there, a lost and tortured soul, or perhaps an echo of something worse. The logic in me says it's all in my head, that none of this can be real. Yet every dream I have tells me otherwise. I share my story now, even though I know how it sounds, but it's the truth as I've lived it. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I jerk awake. Sure, I hear that soft knocking from just beyond the bedroom wall. Knock, knock. The house wants me back, or it wants something from me I'm too afraid to give. I don't know if speaking these words will set me free. Maybe it will only make the nightmare sharper. All I can say is this: if you ever inherit an old place heavy with family secrets, be wary. Sometimes what's buried beneath the foundation should remain sealed. Sometimes the past is more alive than we can bear. And sometimes, no matter how hard we try, it finds a way to reach into the present, wrapping its cold fingers around our hearts, dragging us back into the choking darkness of memory. I can still smell that cedar and dust. And in the silence, I wait for the tapping to return. I wait for the tapping to return. If you ever inherit an old place heavy with family secrets, be wary. Sometimes what's buried beneath the foundation should remain sealed. Sometimes the past is more alive than we can bear. And sometimes, no matter how hard we try, it finds a way. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it, echoing, reminding me that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it, echoing, reminding me that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. If you ever inherit an old place heavy with family secrets, be wary. Sometimes what's buried beneath the foundation should remain sealed. I was able to see how good the foundation was. But with every time I close my eyes, I hear it, echoing, reminding me that some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed.